There we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's live Q&A session. It's all about a research update with the Neonatal Seizure Registry. And we have with us today Dr. Monica Lemmon and Natalie Field. I'm Deanna Bryan. I'm the program manager at Hope. And we're so grateful to have you two. Dr. Lemmon is a pediatric neurologist at Duke Health, and Natalie Field is a medical student at Duke University, as well as the primary author of one of the NSR's recent studies about parental well-being after neonatal seizures. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. Together, their work has been really instrumental in shaping the field of this research, and we're really thrilled to hear more about these ongoing efforts. So as always, we encourage you to ask questions throughout this session. They're here to share their expertise, and we're excited to start this engaging discussion. So to the two of you, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us. It is an honor to be here.
Thank you. We will start, if you don't mind. I know I gave a very, very, very brief introduction to you two, but if you could both begin by providing a brief overview of your careers and how your collaborative relationship with the NSR came to be. Maybe Dr. Lemmon, we can start with you.
That sounds great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I know I don't have to tell this crowd how powerful the Hope community is, and I'm incredibly grateful to your leadership, Deanna, and also to Betsy's and the whole of the organization for supporting our children and families. So I'm Monica Lemmon. As you heard, I'm a child neurologist at Duke, and I focus in neonatal neurology. And my research life is largely about thinking about how we talk about hard things and how we best support parents along their journey. And my work with the Neonatal Seizure Registry began, almost 10 years ago now. And when Duke was invited to join what was already a really important network of sites across the country that were collaborating to do research around neonatal seizures. And one of the pieces of that work that really drew me in, and I think has been really foundational to the group's success, are the ways they think about partnership with parents. And what I mean by that, we'll talk about more, I think, in the coming conversation. But the way that registry has really centered the parent voice in the design of studies and the conduct of studies and how we get the word out about results. And so that's been a really powerful part of my own career and has really shaped my own journey as a child neurologist. So incredibly grateful. And it gives me a great excuse to work with folks like Natalie. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Natalie Field. I am a medical student at Duke. Thank you so much, Deanna, for the introduction. And thank you all for having me here today. I'm so grateful to be here. As far as my career journey so far, I went to undergrad at the University of Delaware, where I majored in neuroscience. There I started doing some research in a lab called the Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up Laboratory that focuses on helping parents provide nurturing care to their infants. I stayed with that lab for around 5 years, including 2 years after graduating, and then I came here to Duke Med. So right now I am in my second research year, and I'm going to be applying into pediatric neurology residency programs next fall. And as far as how I got involved in NSR, so every medical student in their third year at Duke or their first research year, they get involved in at least one big project in an area of their choice. And I've known for a really long time now that I want to do pediatric neurology. And I'm really interested in caring for patients impacted by seizures, so patients with epilepsy, and also caring for patients who've been impacted by neurologic injury really early on in their life. So when I was looking at potential mentors, immediately I found Dr. Lemmon, who's done just such impactful work within this space. And she was just my dream mentor to work with. Mm-hmm. So in one of our earliest meetings, we were talking about the work that she was doing and the work that she was planning to do, and conversations about NSR came up, and it was just a perfect fit. And the rest is sort of history from there.
I love it. And I know you're going to be taking lead on a lot of these questions, Natalie. I know because you are the primary author of that study. That was kind of the motivation behind establishing this Q&A. But before we get into those details, I know that there's so many community members who would appreciate kind of just like a research overview of a lot of things that are going on in the NSR. And I know that's a big ask because there's a lot of work, but maybe let's break it down. We can begin just by providing an overview of the structure of the Neonatal Seizure Registry and how it integrates parents as partners and how that's kind of like a foundational pillar of their approach. I believe, Natalie, you were going to talk about this first, and then Dr. Lemmon, if you have anything to add on, that would be great.
Yeah, so parents' knowledge, parents' experiences are central to everything that's done with NSR, from the beginning of every single study throughout the study's life cycle. And as far as how that actually happens, just to give a little bit of overview, so there's 9 different study sites with NSR, and there's a parent representative from each study site. And we also have our community partners like Hope for HIE, and we have our awesome parent partners from those community sites as well, like the wonderful Betsy Pylon. And our parent partners from each of these communities and different study sites come and give us advice at monthly parent meetings. And what we do is we bring the studies that we're working on or thinking about working on at every single stage of its development and ask parents for their advice and their guidance throughout. So just as an example, maybe early on in the studies, when we're thinking about working on a study, we might ask parents, what questions do you think that we should be asking within this study? And then later on, what language do you think that we should be using here? Is this appropriate language that we should be using? And later on, when we're thinking about writing and review and editing, if parents are particularly interested, they join us as co-authors and are just so incredibly helpful. And then when we get to the final stages, like where we're at right now, and we're thinking about disseminating this information to communities, again, parents are so central to helping us get the message out there. So again, at every single stage, parents really help us, and none of this work could really happen without them.
Wonderful.
I think I'll just add that, I think we really hope this is a model for other areas of science, where we really start with what questions matter to the people who are living the condition, and how ought we study that? What outcomes matter to you? And I hope that NSR has really served as a model for other research teams who are looking for how to do that best.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we just had a Q&A with our Hope's new clinical research program manager 2 days ago, and that's kind of been central in her work too, is just this family patient-centered focus and this approach to making sure that researchers have the information they need to perform studies about the impacts and outcomes that matter to families. And I know that that's something that's that NSR has been doing now for a long time. So I know that there is a lot of work. We've spoken to some other esteemed members of the NSR too about it in the past, but there has been some time that has lapsed between those conversations and this one. So if you could provide a brief overview of some of the published work with the NSR, I know that we would love to hear some of those updates.
Yeah, so as we sort of talked about a little bit, NSR has been going on for quite some time now. It's been over a decade at this point, and they've done just so much incredible work within this space in so many different areas. And the goal has ultimately been to help advance the care of patients impacted by neonatal seizures and also be able to better support their families as well. As far as the work that they've done, it's been in a lot of different areas, from helping to guide treatment options, as far as showing that there's been safety in early discontinuation of anti-seizure medications, showing what the risks are as far as future epilepsy and adverse neurodevelopmental outcomes. And then mainly what we're focusing on here today is the family impacts. As far as other studies, we've shown the mental health impacts for families, showing that there are persistently increased risks for symptoms of anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And there's also been a study, I believe led by Dr. Lemmon, really showing parents advice for us as clinicians on how we can provide better care for them and for their children. As far as the newest studies with the longitudinal parent experience piece, we've been looking at how do parents describe their experiences over time in caring for their children impacted by neonatal seizures. And we also created a question prompt list, or a structured list of questions commonly asked by parents to promote effective communication between parents and their child's care team.
I love it. Doctor, I know that was a great segue now into your work, Natalie. Dr. Lemmon, I guess before we move on, do you have anything to add, or are you comfortable kind of moving on to Natalie's?
I think Natalie summarized it beautifully.
I love it. I love it. All right. So Natalie, this is your time to shine. What a huge accomplishment.
Oh my God.
Primary author of this study. So if you could share a little bit more detail about that newest published research that you're talking about that focused on parent well-being. And I can give you some prompts to kind of guide your responses. The first of which is, what were some focus areas that parents wanted as partners in these studies? And then the second was, what prompted the development of that question prompt list? I have more, but we'll start there just for consistency and ease.
Yeah, so as far as the focus areas go, I remember in one of the earliest meetings with the parent panel that we talked about, we were showing just some of the preliminary results from the study, and one of the parents shared how nice it was to see some positive experiences from parents. And so a lot of the research that's out there, she said, was really depressing, and said there's risks of this and there's risks of that, and nothing is really talking about the positive experiences that parents have. And how it was so nice for her to be able to finally see that in research and see her experiences represented. So I think that was something that was really important for us, was to try to show balance in the longitudinal parent experience study, and really relying on our parent partners to be able to do that and show both the challenges and the joys. As far as focus for the question prompt list, I remember in one of the earliest iterations, I had compiled like all of the questions that we had gotten from our parents in the study, since I wanted to be as thorough as possible and make sure that I was showing, all of the possible questions. And when we ended up bringing that to our parents, they shared how that could be overwhelming, especially when we're thinking about early on, giving this to a parent early on in their child's care when it's already such an overwhelming time. So a focus area there was really trying to simplify and making it as easy to, get and digest as possible. So yeah. Dr. Lemmon, do you have anything that you'd want to add to either of those?
No, I think you summarized it beautifully. And that's a great example of how, sometimes our initial instincts as researchers might not align with what would actually be most useful to folks. And so it was a great example of the parent partners really helping steer us in a direction that was going to be most impactful.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity as well, I know that you said you distilled that original list into a much more digestible one. Do you mind listing maybe like 2 or 3 some of those questions that were on that list, just to give our audience members some context of what exists on that document?
Yeah, so on our final question prompt list piece, there are questions such as, what are seizures and what can I best do to support my baby's development? So we tried to, again, have a lot of questions that were most important to parents. As far as the questions that were distilled, we ended up taking out questions that were more focused on later on in life, thinking maybe we might want to make a question prompt list more focused on those later years, and focusing this one more, again, on the early care.
And I know that you have some results for this longitudinal parental well-being. So if you could go over what those results are, and then supplement that with which of those results, if any, surprised you or you found interesting in some way.
Yeah, of course. So as far as the results, so we found 3 big overarching themes for the longitudinal parent experience piece, which we titled Joys of Being a Parent, That sort of talks about the positive aspects in parenting. We also found a big overarching theme, which we titled Managing Day-to-Day Life, talking about those day-to-day challenges that parents had. And then the last one was personal burden of care. So this talks about the emotional challenges that parents shared, and the physical challenges, the financial challenges. And these three big overarching themes, they were consistent at every time point that we studied, from the newborn period up until age 8. And what was actually within each big theme was different sort of within these different time points. So just as an example, within the positive experiences, in those early time points, we saw a lot of parents talk about having gratitude and being a caregiver, and also being really excited to be able to come home with their child and be able to spend quality time together. And then in those later years, we saw a lot of parents talk about excitement and getting to know who their child is as a person, learning what they love, if it's music or if it's dancing, and also being able to celebrate their child's developmental milestones. So even though those big overarching themes were consistent across those different time points, we saw how they manifested was often different. Another thing that I thought was interesting within the results was we saw a lot of uncertainty at different time points. So early on at the discharge time point, we saw over 2/3 of parents share feelings of uncertainty, or what we call this fear of the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen as far as, what's going to happen as far as my child's development. Is my child going to have seizures again in the future? And still at 2 years, we saw over 40% of parents still sharing these fears. And still, those even later time points, parents were still sharing fears around the future. So I think that's something that I really want to keep in mind for my own practice is these feelings of uncertainty can persist. As far as what I found the most surprising within the results, I expected the wide majority of parents to share a lot of the positive experiences that they had. What I was not expecting was nearly 99% of parents to share all of the wonderful experiences that they did, and for this to be the most prominent category. And as somebody who got to read through all of the positive responses, it was just such a treat. And I think also points to what that parent panel member was saying, that this is such a huge part of the parent experience, and it's missing from the current literature. So
I think that what you have accomplished in this is so profound, and for a multitude of reasons. The first is just because it does act as like a strike dichotomy, as you say, to traditional research that's out there that can lead to even more fear of the unknown, or feelings of, the opposite of feeling optimistic about their child and all the joy. So I think that's amazing for parents, especially in our community, to read, because there does need to kind of be like a beacon of light, especially in literature. And then I think another wonderful thing about your study is that, our family members, they're used to reading about impacts and outcomes for the children who experience the neonatal seizures. But there hasn't really, I feel, been a huge prominent part of literature looking at the parental experience. So the fact that I think a lot of our parents can read this and learn about it, and just have shared common experience, and just help them feel seen and validated, I think that's so important. So in terms of taking what you've learned and then applying it to the future, I know that you said that, yes, there are so many joys and wonderful aspects of that you've seen in this parental well-being longitudinal study, but there are also, I'm sure, gap areas too that have been addressed, especially in terms of having resources for these parents, building resilience, having targeted interventions for these families. So if we could kind of shift this conversation to that future, and what that could potentially look like, are there plans to develop additional interventions for these families who are experiencing these emotions and these journeys?
Yeah, so as far as what I would envision for the future, what I'd love to see, I think that there's just so much here that warrants more research. there's a lot more that we can do to be better supporting our families, which, our families are telling us. As far as how we could better psychosocially support our families, I would love to see more universal access to mental health care and more universal mental health screenings for families. As far as how this could happen, I would love to see some maybe quality improvement initiatives or QI projects, really trying to improve the frequency of screenings that we're doing for families. I would also really love to see some interventions developed around promoting resiliency and post-traumatic growth really early on in families' care. So perhaps in the NICU setting. And also we had some parents in our studies share particular challenges with caring for a child impacted by like medical complexity. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see more research in that space and helping to address those gaps. And as far as what's currently on the horizon, what's currently being done, I'd love to pass that off to Dr. Lemmon to have her talk a little bit more about her work.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie. It is such a joy to get to hear you elevate the voices that you heard and read in this work. So thank you for doing that so beautifully. The beautiful thing about NSR is that what we're presenting today is just kind of a tiny slice of data that we collected and that parents were so generous to share with us. And some of the data that they shared were actually surveys around their own well-being. And what I think strikes us in the qualitative data in sort of those open-ended responses is that there are threats to well-being kind of all along the care trajectory. They don't stop in the NICU for many families. And then a big sort of immediate next step of NSR is we're finishing up a big bucket of data collection that will allow us to look at parent well-being in a quantitative way, measures of anxiety, measures of symptoms of depression, measures of post-traumatic stress, really across early childhood and school age, which will give us some insight into how often families are experiencing threats to well-being and how we might better support them. And so the immediate next steps of NSR are to dive into the data that are just coming in around parent well-being and its relationship to things like child outcome, or the types of services their child is able to have access to. And I think that'll be really intervention driving for us. Broadly, our own work, both within NSR, but outside of it, our group's work now is transitioned into, we've learned a lot. Parents have shared a lot with us about challenges they face. And now it's time to design interventions that help us do something about that. And so there are a lot of models out there of interventions to draw upon that could support parents who are dealing with neonatal seizures, who are dealing with the diagnosis of HIE, that include interventions to promote resilience, interventions to support mental health, interventions to help parents navigate or interact with the healthcare system and communicate with clinicians, how we coach physicians and other types of care providers around communicating with families. Those are all kind of intervention types that we're in the process of exploring in our own work. But I'll say that, in my mind, the key foundation to all of that is really hearing directly from parents about what works for them, what would actually help them, and having parents on the research team to help us design those and study them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that whole approach. I just feel like that's what's going to drive that meaningful change forward. I really do. So we have an eager and very committed community. So they're always looking for ways to get involved. So I guess my question is, are there ways for HIE families to get involved? And I know Dr. Lemmon, I think maybe she had an internet connection issue. Maybe she logged off. So Natalie, to put you on the spot until she logs back on, do you know if there are any ways for HIE families to get involved in any of this type of future research for the NSR?
Yeah, so NSR is, I believe they're still enrolling. Oh, there's Dr. Lemmon.
There she is. Welcome to the what happens when you're live and what happens when your technology fails you. We know the story well.
Yeah.
Well.
So
Natalie,
we're talking about ways for families to get involved.
Yes.
I suspect Natalie was already hitting this answer out of the park. I'll start by saying actually Hope for HIV families have already been involved in a wide variety of our work, both by surveys that you've completed or parents who volunteered to sort of test tools that groups are developing. I would start by saying, keep an eye out and amplify what you're hearing from Hope for HIE. You can visit the Neonatal Seizure Registry website, which includes, ongoing studies, infographics that can be shared, copies of studies that you can read and digest yourself and also amplify with the communities you work with. And so those are some immediate ways to get involved. But I would say that watching out for communications from Hope for HIE or other advocacy networks that you're a part of is a good way to be on the lookout for opportunities to get involved.
Absolutely. Now, Natalie, I know on our list of questions that we have, the third one under this bucket was, what's planned for the NSR and parent well-being. I know that you briefly touched upon that before we talked about how HAE families can get involved, but I want to make sure before we move on to the next section, is there anything else that you want to add to that, or I just want to make sure I give you the opportunity to say anything in case you missed anything.
Yeah, no, I think Dr. Lemmon, she did a wonderful job with really talking about that next step as far as what NSR has planned for parent well-being, but yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Then I feel comfortable then moving on to our recommended resources portion of our Q&A. We always love to end these sessions by asking what informational or support resources that you as esteemed medical professionals would recommend for parents navigating, in this case, the emotional challenges associated with neonatal seizures and those potential outcomes. So anything you have to share would be greatly appreciated.
So I'll again plug the Neonatal Seizure Registry website. We collate a lot of our resources there, and that's where you can find an infographic around our initial parent well-being work. There will be a new infographic coming up soon that summarizes the paper Natalie just described. You can find our question prompt list there. I suspect we'll make more of those. And so you can, you'll be able to find future question prompt lists there as well, along with ways to get involved. And you'll see when you go to that website, there's also sort of a contact link if you want to know more from that individual team. And of course, I can't help but be another voice around the resources created by Hope for HIE. In full disclosure, I sit on the medical advisory board and I'm a longtime cheerleader of this organization, and have been really grateful that not only do those resources include the expertise of a wide range of clinicians in different disciplines. Importantly, I think they really are centered in the parent voice. And so very much appreciate those resources and hope folks are taking advantage of those.
Well, the reason we have those resources are because, we have people like you who are helping do the work so we can create them. So thank you so much for joining us today. And it's been really insightful learning once again about all of the wonderful work that NSR is doing. And Natalie, it's so exciting that even you on your journey to becoming an official, I suppose, official doctor. We're so excited that we have people like you to do this research and who have developed such a passion for helping families, especially in our community. So once again, we appreciate you having here. And for everyone watching out there, just remember that we're going to take this Q&A and we're going to turn it into helpful key takeaways in the format of a blog, and we can post them on our social media channels. So that way you can rewatch this on our YouTube and you can find kind of those key highlights in those resources. So until then, I'm sure we will meet again. But thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.